Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Is the mic on?
Can you hear me? Yes, I am. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Strickland from JLS Consulting. Welcome to the Arabian Travel Markets Aviation Sessions. This is the first one of three which we have today, and as part of this year's programme. We're going to look this morning at the Saudi Arabian low-cost market. It's a very interesting market. It's one which is perhaps not known in people's minds as a market for low-cost carriers, but it's a big population which needs to travel, and the demand is there for the low-cost airlines business model. And there's been a lot of news about Saudi Arabia in recent weeks in terms of opening up the market. The first airline, or certainly the first one of the two first airlines that did set up as low-cost carriers in Saudi Arabia is FlyNas, and they have you could say, a veteran industry leader as their chief executive. So I'd like to welcome him to the stage now, Paul Byrne, Chief Executive of FlyNas. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you.
Maybe you mind the veteran introduction?
That's
Have a seat, all right.
I've been called worse.
So, Paul, I think it was right to say FlyNas was one of two low-cost carriers, but the only one surviving from that beginning period.
Sama, I think were there before my time, so it wasn't me. But yeah, unfortunately, they didn't survive.
And you've been there how long yourself? You came in as a consultant.
I came in as a consultant in July of 2014 for a nice 6-month contract.
And you're still there?
Still there, yeah. Obviously did something wrong.
Okay. But your own experience, I mean, you've been in the industry, what, about 35 years and worked in a number of airlines, but particularly in the low-cost sector.
Yeah, I had kind of what you might describe as a 25-year summer job in Aer Lingus. So that started back in 1979. So I left Aer Lingus and started into consultancy with a lot of, and pretty much at that time Aer Lingus had decided to take on the low-cost model. We had an excellent, I suppose, teacher next door to us in Ryanair as to how to do it. So I pretty much bought into it after fighting it for quite a while, as most legacy employees will do. This will never work. You can't do that here. That might work in your place, but it won't work here. And I was one of those guys, but I don't know if there was a road to Damascus kind of thing, but it started to make sense to me, even in revenue management, who typically would be the team that would fight the idea of lowering yields. But the balance in the long run started to make sense to me, and the model, if you can get it right, is fantastic as a business.
Was that when Willie Walsh was leading the airline?
Correct.
Because I remember hearing that he used to see Ryanair aircraft going past the window with the harp on the tail, and Aer Lingus had a shamrock, and he would say to the team, if we don't do something, there'll be no more shamrocks, only harps.
Yeah, he was an interesting guy, because at the time, Aer Lingus would react to things as a national carrier normally does. And Willie, I think, was the first Aer Lingus CEO who decided that Michael O'Leary wasn't going to buy you. And we were going to do our own business and survive that way rather than reacting to everything that they did. He was a great boss to work for, because every one of us was as clear as day what we had to do and when we had to do it by.
Well, it's quite ironic that some years later, having not convinced the Irish government to wholly privatise Aer Lingus at the time, he's now managed to buy it for his current airline organisation, IAG.
Yeah, I'd have to say, a big shukran to Willie Walsh. When I left Aer Lingus, it was on a voluntary basis, and he was putting up quite a few euros at the time for people to volunteer for it. So he paid me then, and now as IAG, he's bought my remaining shares in Aer Lingus. Well, he's a good guy. He's my ATM.
Excellent. Now, after that, so did you go to another airline immediately, or into consulting?
No, I went into consulting, and I actually managed to get out of the business even for about 18 months. And I was working with small and medium enterprises, and I got a phone call from a guy in Bangalore. He said, come down for 1 week. That was 12 years ago. I've been out of the business since.
Okay. And you've really been around the world to many different markets, particularly low-cost focus, parts of Asia, Mexico as well. How have you found the emergence of a low-cost business model around the world? Is the fundamental core the same principle, or does it vary a lot? product?
Yeah, I kind of met myself quite regularly. As I said, I was the guy that said this will never work. So pretty much everywhere I've gone, I've been told that might work for Ryanair, that might work for Southwest, but it won't work here. And lo and behold, it has. Now there are different nuances in different markets, but typically the concept stays the same. Control your costs, control your operation, don't get carried away with who you are, and stick with what you're good at.
I mean, I was in the same boat as you, working for an airline in the UK, KLM, the Dutch airline, had a UK subsidiary. When Ryanair began to get big at Stansted, none of us believed it would really work. We thought this can't possibly work in Europe, especially as they were flying to many airports that people had never heard of and claiming they were close to big cities and offering fares which seemed impossibly low. But I think the key point you just touched on is about costs. I think that's possibly a big change in the thinking of good airline management, and certainly Willie Walsh is one of those. Would you agree about that? Many airline bosses in the past, they wanted to glamour, but they didn't think about the cost to get through to a profitable bottom line.
Well, I think what happens is that the bigger you get, the more input you're getting from a layer of management, and a lot of vested interest starts to move in. People who want to look good, or think it'd be a great idea if we did this, and it'd look fantastic, and it'd be this and it'd be that, but typically they're not looking at the bottom line, so what I try to say to our guys is, look, revenue is fleeting. If you look at even Ryanair's yields and whatnot, it will vary through the year, but their load factor stays pretty constant. So long as you can manage that line, then that's the way to go. And if you're going to come up with an idea, come up with something that's going to make me some money. If it looks great, that's a bonus. But make sure that it at least washes its face.
Because again, in terms of principles, Ryanair says frequently we are load factor active, revenue passive. They will fill that plane almost at any price. And you'll hear other people say, well, you cannot judge an airline's performance by its load factor. Anybody can get high load factors by giving it away. Yeah. So the key, the trick, or the discipline more than the trick, I guess, is that balance between cost and revenue and productivity.
Yeah, I think the key word there is discipline. If you want to look at the better airlines of the world, they do what they do, and they do it consistently, and they don't get diverted from that. Ryanair are a classic in terms of the way they do things. You cannot bring a business idea to them unless it's going to at least double what their investment will be, and this is the important bit, it doesn't change what they do day to day. So you could bring them a $20 million idea, but if it meant that everybody had to do something different, that would be it. Forget it. Come back to me when it fits our model.
Now, when you arrived or were asked to come out initially to do some consultancy with FlyNas, what was your thinking about this Saudi market? Before you went there, you were reflecting whether to do the consultancy, and then when you actually got there for real.
Yeah. Well, I suppose I was brought in, and the idea was the fixed commercial so FlyNas had I suppose a habit of hiring a new CEO every year, and that CEO would be brought in to fix something or other. And unfortunately, once that job was done, then they went and found someone else. So I was thinking, okay, I'll go in and I'll do what I normally do. There's bound to be some low-hanging fruit that we can start off with, typically around revenue management. And it struck me that the lack of consistency for the team. So the guys were looking at me thinking, okay, yeah, sure, this is a great idea, but you're going to be gone in 6 months.
Right.
And someone else is going to come in and tell me something different. It's very difficult to operate in those circumstances. So one of the things that we have done in FlyNas is try to bring in industry professionals and lock them in for a minimum of 3 years. I've done the same. My first contract was for 12 months, in keeping with, and that was my choice rather than the company's. I said, look, you've never had a CEO that's lasted more than 12 months, so why would I be any different? So let's try the 12 months, see how we go. That finished last November. I signed a 3-year deal at that stage. And anyone I've brought in since has been locked into that deal as well. So that we can give a level of consistency to the people that work for us. If we're going to ask them to make an effort, we have to show a commitment ourselves. And I think that's only reasonable.
And the airline's been around, is it 8 years now? 9 years?
9 years.
Okay.
9 years in February.
I guess it was set up without these business disciplines and had perhaps a patchy path initially.
Yeah, like the first iteration of Nasser, I believe, was a company called Al Khayala, which was an all business class.
Right.
You know, high-end kind of stuff. Interesting how many times that comes up in the business. It's almost like 3D movies. It comes around every 20 years or so and doesn't work.
And that was short haul as well.
That was short haul. That was local stuff. I mean, you can see some element of it. Like Saudi Arabia has the highest level of airplane ownership, private airplane ownership. So I suppose there is a market there, but the market is for small private airplanes, not for 319s and 320s. And we see another iteration of that again now in one of our neighbours. We're starting that up on Riyadh Jeddah. Good luck, you know. But the one thing NAS, I suppose, had at the time is it was scrapping to get airplanes. It was thinking about, should we do this, should we do that? And as I said, you get a new CEO in, a guy comes in, he's a pilot, he fixes flight operations. Commercial still needs help, or this needs help, that needs help. So it took a while to get a model. I think about 3 years ago they fixed on the low cost idea, and it's a Saudi low cost, which is different to the standard. So for example, FlyNas has 8 business class seats, proper business class seats on every flight.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah. So it is a low cost airline, but as you said, it has business class. So this is something that in the past would have been an anathema for low cost. It would be a single cabin. But in this part of the world, Fly Dubai also has a business class. So you as if you're like a battle-hardened low-cost executive around the world, you would say that is justified in the case of FlyNas?
It's justified on a number of our core routes. You know, it's a cabin crew rest area on some of them. You know, there are certain areas we fly and certain markets we fly into, which would be, for example, all labour. So literally these guys aren't even paying for the tickets themselves. They're coming into Saudi Arabia for 2 years. This is probably the first airplane they've ever been on. The next one will be the one that takes them home. So they're never going to buy business class. They won't even buy a sandwich, you know. So it gets somewhat wasteful in that area, but by and large, it's working for us. We're quite happy with it, and you know, there are some markets, for example, in Dubai, where we find it very difficult to hold on to seats. You know, the demand is so high.
I know, talking with Fly Dubai before, they've said exactly that point. There are some markets they've flown to, some of the Confederation of Independent States, and they gave as an example that they wouldn't have got customers to come from other airlines having not offered this product.
Okay. Yeah, well, there is definitely, I mean, 70% of our flying is domestic, and there is definitely a demand there for a business class.
And what about our domestic market? I mean, Saudi's got a big population. Is it 80 million? Or
27, I believe, if you include all the expats.
27 million in the country?
Yeah.
Okay, so I got that completely wrong. But there's still people who want to travel.
Yeah.
And haven't had the opportunity to do so, particularly in the past.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of a cry around the nation that, you know, it's all very well between Riyadh, Jeddah, Dammam, etc., but what about us? So there's, I think, 23 airports owned by GACA. They want to expand and open them all up. I think that's the King's wish as well. We're more than happy to facilitate that, but only at a profit. So some of them are quite small areas. It would be a public service as opposed to a business. But if we see profit and sustainability, we'll go for it.
Okay. And in that domestic market, what type of customers do you have? And in my notes, I put the classic headlines of business customers, leisure customers. Who are these people? And could you tell us a bit about also the age profile of the country?
Well, the age profile is it's young. So, you know, one of the first things we decided that we had to do was get a good app, get a good website, you know, so that we can get in touch with people. And we're very happy with what we've got so far. And we're working hard on updating it at least once a month, something new, something fresh. There's certain challenges in there, in that there's the payment system is kind of a broken by you have to confirm your debit card. Credit cards work fine, but the debit card you need to go back and confirm it with your bank. So we drop off a lot of people with that, but there's ways of getting them back. In terms of the person who travels with us, well, it can vary quite dramatically from one time of the year to the next. So we get a lot of people who fly in, as I said, as labourers. So if you look at the Riyadh and the Dammam market, a lot of the external travel would be to do with business, and it's at both ends. So you've got to kind of everything from the CEO to the ditch there, flying into the two, let's say, economic cities. And then with Jeddah, you've got pilgrims, by and large, huge, and they're usually in groups, very heavily travel agent focused because of the way that the visa has to work for Umrah, and so a lot of that is a little bit out of our control. We prefer the model of interacting directly with our customers if we can. Travel agencies play a huge role still in the market. And we recognise that, and we've got some really good partnerships with travel agencies around the region. So it's never going to be that pure Ryanair, Southwest Global Travel Agents as well. So we're in GDSs. We're anywhere we can connect with you, we're there. But the profile, there's probably a profile of the customer that I want is the guy who now gets into his car and drives 5, 6, 7 hours
around the country.
Around the country, right. Yeah, and it's not the safest place to drive. So I'd like to make their life a little safer and a little more comfortable, and they can fly with me. And if you want to rent a car from me at the end of it, happy days.
So much better. So you think the surface has only really just been scratched in the market?
Yes, I think the more if people start flying, more people start seeing it as an option. But again, that's about putting the service in, and you've had 70 years of aviation in Saudi Arabia now, and pretty much all of it is, ever since the jet age started, it's all been jets. So in one way, it's kind of a spoiled market in that people just expect you to pitch up with a jet. So it's an interesting place from that perspective, and there's certain challenges in the domestic market, but there is at certain times of the year, for example at Eids, there's just an insatiable appetite for Saudis to go abroad. It's amazing, how full airports get, and typically that's the day the baggage belt will break. So.
And you mentioned about religious tourism, and I was reading, it's quite incredible that you have a completely separate subsidiary for the Hajj, and I don't know if it's for Umrah as well, and you lease in aircraft of all types, wide bodies, more or less whatever you can get your hands on.
Yeah.
How do you run that? Because I worked in those markets myself many years ago from a long-haul perspective, British Caledonian, so I know Umrah runs several times during the year. Hajj is once, but it varies, the timing varies. So how do you manage that? And what are you offering? Obviously you're offering a seat to people to get there, but is it a FlyNas product, or are you using your name to...
Well, I suppose the aircraft will have some kind of decal on it that's the staff will look FlyNas. The Hajj is a very, very separate type of business, yes. And we're very careful that it's mostly Saudis that are involved in managing that. Probably somebody with my accent wouldn't do much business in that area. But it's a well-run group, very tight little group that just starts almost from the end of the last Hajj. The guys have been out chasing, making sure the customers we had this year, the customers we have next year, trying to get more and trying to get aircraft in. And it is quite a motley crew, if you like, in terms of the fleet that we have in, but it suits certain countries to have certain types of airplanes, and some countries will actually specify the type of aircraft they want.
So to use on the Hajj.
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing, but it's very much an organised, more charter than
right.
So you're not going to go online and book it because it's just not the way things are done with the Hajj. But it's a phenomenal business. It's there to stay, and we're delighted that we're part of it. But it is very organised, and even your access to different countries is restricted, by the Hajj community.
And beyond Hajj and Umrah, I mean, Saudi Arabia's obviously got a lot of history, some of that is religiously linked, but hearing some of the statements even in the last few days about the country's objective to move away from oil reliance, and even do so fairly quickly, do you see that tourism itself may broaden out? We'll see more foreign visitors who are coming for broader tourism and cultural interest reasons.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one for Saudi Arabia. But the tourism itself, I mean, there's still a lot of Saudis that haven't seen, different parts of Saudi Arabia. So a lot of domestic tourism is there, has potential. A lot of people can go around the country from one side to the other. There's obviously, if people do get a tourist type visa, which doesn't exist at the moment, we're well capable of carrying them to places of interest around the country. So it's great to see, that the thinking is coming along those lines. It's not something that we'd force the thinking on, but we're delighted to hear the noises that are coming out of the government at the moment, which is, we're in a position to take advantage, if you like, of whatever opens up, and we're a flexible enough organisation that we can do it quickly.
Okay. Paul, my next question, you've been asked many times, but maybe people in the audience are not aware that the regulatory environment, again, is a tough one from a point of view of low cost. You have fuel subsidy that applies to Saudi but not to any other airline, and you have the kind of quite unusual fare cap principle. Can you just tell us a bit about those two things from FlyNas' point of view?
So I suppose when there was only one airline, they received the subsidy, and the King quite wisely decided, if I'm going to subsidise you, you can't overcharge my citizens. So we have a fare cap. So then upstarts like ourselves arrive, and you can have a fare cap. Okay. And we have a subsidy? No. So we have a little bit of a derogation on the fare cap. So at the moment, I think if we take Jeddah Riyadh, the fare cap has been increased up to 310 riyals, which is still less than $100. So that's the most anyone can charge up to 10 days before the flight. Saudi are allowed to increase that by 10% within that 10-day period. We can go up to 80% increase. Then this is for an economy seat.
Right.
There is another one that says that if you reach a 70% load factor and it's outside of the 10 days, you can also increase the fare cap by those amounts. I've no idea why the 10 days or the 70% are significant. Again, it's one of those things that seems to have happened in a civil servant's office.
Right. Just to come up with an idea.
Let's pick two numbers. Yeah. Like why not 50% in 20 days?
Yeah.
Makes no sense to me.
But you mentioned that applies to economy fares. Does that mean that you are free to charge what you regard as commercial fares in business class?
Yes.
Okay. And the other thing I think is amazing, I think I talked to you about this when we first met a few months ago, is that the Saudi market generally books incredibly late. You get quite high load factors, but 10 days out, you might be sitting on looking at your booking system with a fairly empty plate.
Yeah, I think if I was working for Michael O'Leary, I'd have been fired quite a long time ago when he sees the advanced bookings. But there is that, if you'll excuse the phrase, the inshallah, let's go. We do have people who will fly today from Riyadh to Jeddah and vice versa, or Dammam, with nothing booked at the moment.
Right. By the end of the day, maybe they'll float.
Yeah. So, you cater for that. It's not uncommon in a lot of the larger Muslim markets. Indonesia was very similar. Indonesian people who arrived at the airport and were literally, they had this individual known as, not very nicely called the airport rat, who literally went and grabbed your bags and said, "Where are you going?" And would disappear, and you just literally chased that guy to a ticket counter. And he was effectively the travel agency that brought you to whatever airline it was, and you bought your ticket from them. But it was quite common for people to just pitch up at the airport with no bookings. It's a bit scary sometimes, especially when you're new to the business. You kind of look at the advanced bookings and you go, "Oh, lads, this can't work." And we're trying to educate the public that it's, if you book earlier, we'll charge you less. And we've gone below the fare cap on a lot of domestic markets to try and generate some business.
Stimulate the demand.
Yeah, and sometimes it works, sometimes people are just resistant to it. They'll make their mind up when they're good and ready. So.
And what about load factors? I mentioned about Ryanair's approach about being very aggressive on load factors. Are you in what you would call a ballpark of low-cost airline load factor performance?
No, we'd like more, to be honest with you. And this is partly the encouraging thing for me, is that we can manage to be profitable at what I consider to be less than optimal load factors.
Right.
So that's the good news. We put a lot of pressure on our commercial team this year, and we've got some good partnerships with OTAs as well. They're doing really good work for us to try and boost that load factor. But we're not going to do it at any price. So there are particularly strong times of the year where you just don't play with your fares. And there's certain movements around the night, around the country. Like the King goes down to Mecca for Ramadan.
Mm-hmm.
The whole of his government moves with him.
Right.
So everybody goes to Jeddah. It's amazing.
So there's a whole
if you
back and forth during that.
If you want a farm stand,
got to go
to
there.
Jeddah.
Okay.
And
It's a very unique kind of market
It
characteristic.
is. You
You've
don't
got to
get
be
that
aware
too
of
much.
something.
Yeah, I don't think old Mr. O'Leary would fancy that one.
Yeah. What about connecting traffic? Thinking online, do you get people connecting between your international and domestic flights, or between domestic points via one of the hubs?
We get a little bit of that. A lot of it is, some of it can be self-connecting. We don't really sell it. We don't see ourselves as a connecting carrier as such. I think in the past that might have been one of the big ideas, to connect, especially when we were flying A330s. But it's not what we do. We're much better we have an excellent operations team, so we fly 85 to 90% on time. We get people to where they want to go efficiently. So most of our customers, as far as we're concerned, are point to point. But I do know that we have quite a high number of the people who, for example, fly to Dubai, will connect into the international airlines that are here.
Onto Emirates and so on.
Anyone who's flying, every colour of airplane that you can see out at the airport here. And this is one of the reasons why the DXB is more attractive to us.
And not only Dubai, but officially you have a partnership, a code-share partnership with Etihad. And I believe that does pretty well for you in terms of your flights to Abu Dhabi are good performers and benefiting Etihad's long-haul network.
Yeah, it's an excellent partnership. We kind of reinvigorated it in the last 10 months. We see a lot of good fit between ourselves and Etihad, and we're getting some good traction with their management team as well. There's some great engagement from them. We haven't heard no yet for anything we've asked, and when they ask us for stuff, we do try our best to deliver. But you're right. I mean, our Riyadh Abu Dhabi started there recently, and last December, and it's just gone gangbusters. So it's certainly something, the relationship, we would like to expand it. But it is, as you say, it's geared around their main banks of departures internationally. We do have some point-to-point traffic, especially around the weekends.
I was going to ask, it's got to work commercially for both sides, because often the challenge is for independent airlines that are cutting up the ticket into its portions for each player. Either the long-haul airline gets the lion's share of the money, or the short-haul carrier gets next to nothing, or you claim your bigger share, but they're not happy what they get left with.
Well, that's where partnership comes in. So, that's a big, long discussion before you put anything up for sale. What's in it for me, effectively. And we're happy with, the way that's been managed at the moment. And we're happy to go into partnerships with airlines that make sense, in terms of our traffic and what the demand is in the kingdom and from elsewhere to the kingdom. But, it has to make sense to us. We're not just going to do it just to fill an airplane.
and there's not a likelihood of you becoming part of Etihad's equity alliance with actually investing in you.
Thankfully, something like that is well above my pay grade. So
Right.
I have a simple job of FlyNas.
Managing
Just make it
as a
profitable.
CEO.
Yeah.
Okay. And yet, you did touch on it. You briefly did long haul, but only for about a year, I think.
Thankfully, it was less than that. The amount of money we lost on it, but yeah, it I think started around July. It only just started when I arrived as a consultant. I stopped before I was the CEO.
Right. Okay. So very short-lived.
Yeah.
And in terms of your network decisions, I mean, how do you go about deciding where to fly? What is the process? And second point on that, how do you decide the link between your domestic or international destinations?
Well, I suppose, if I talk to anybody in the room here, every one of them will have an idea where we should fly next. And unfortunately, in the past, that's how we managed. So someone would have a light bulb moment in the office, why don't we fly to, and we did, depending on how high up the hierarchy they were, yeah. And, poured money into it, which was fantastic, and it didn't work. And so, well, there you go. So now we're a lot more scientific. I mentioned earlier I'm bringing in people, and the key to it is professionals who've worked and they understand the low-cost model, the low-cost thinking, and how to make a plan. So we've now bolstered our network planning team, and they pretty much work off projections of profit. So there are plenty of places you could fly, and there would be lots of people who fly there. But the key question is, can we do this at a profit? And a perfect example, for example, would be the Indian subcontinent, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, India itself. There are literally millions upon millions of Muslims who would want to come into Saudi Arabia. But it's getting there at a profit, getting in there at the right price. And so, as I mentioned, we're an A320 carrier. At the moment, the Arabian Peninsula, Egypt, Khartoum, Turkey, that's about the ring within which we see ourselves flying. There's plenty of opportunity in there. We've opened up probably 4 international and 6 domestic routes in the last year, and we'll continue along that line. But most of our flying, 65 to 70%, depending on the time of the year, is domestic. There is a good demand there, and once we can do that profitably, we'll continue to expand there.
And you mentioned Istanbul. I think I saw you were going to enter, or you are entering partnership with Pegasus, the large Turkish low-cost carrier. How will that work? Will you physically fly into Istanbul, or do you already? Or
we do already. It's an interesting place. We fly to Sabiha Gökçen, which is the Asian airport. Yeah. And so that's Pegasus Bay, right. Home base. I had an excellent contract with those guys a couple of years ago. They're a fantastic organisation. They really do their business well. Yeah. And it made perfect sense to us. There is a huge demand in both countries to travel between. It's hard to get your hair cut in Riyadh without talking to a Turk. Yes. And there's a lot of property ownership in Turkey coming from Saudi Arabia, so it's a nice mix. They have a fantastic network domestically, so do we. Sabiha we'd like to do at least daily, if not double daily, from both Riyadh and Jeddah if we could. They're building a second runway there, so access at the moment is limited. Where we keep banging on the door, asking for better times, asking for more times.
I mean, Istanbul overall is constrained, isn't it? With both airports, so we're going to get a new airport.
They are, yeah. That's going to be
2 years.
The biggest airport in the world, and they're going to do it in 2 years. Good luck. They wouldn't put it past them, though.
We can't get a new runway in the UK.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Dublin Airport is finally, after about 14 years, decided to put another one in. But the plans, I think the Turks, to be fair to them, they're good builders. They go in and they do things that they say they're going to do. So it might not take as short a time as they plan to do it, but the will is there to do it. So I'm happy with that. And Pegasus, as I said, is a good fit for us. So
They also were very different to Michael Leary, but a very charismatic leader in Alice Abanji.
yeah. Ali's he's a good guy to work for. He looks after his people, and you know, in Pegasus, you don't work for Pegasus. You're part of the Pegasus family, and that's again something that I really enjoyed being a part of at the time, even though I was only a consultant. I was made felt at home. And I think that's something that we've tried to generate in FlyNas, and we refer to ourselves as the FlyNas family, and we look after one another. So it does make it a lot easier for people to come into work in that atmosphere and to give you 100% more regularly.
Okay. Now, you mentioned about the fleet, then you're a short-haul airline. You have 26 aircraft currently, getting a couple more, and you've said publicly that you will grow substantially.
Yes.
To about 100 aircraft?
Well, we're currently in an RFP process with both Boeing and Airbus, and we've said the magic number is 100, but effectively it'll be 60 airplanes plus option on 40 is the kind of the way we're looking at it, but we leave that up to them, depends on the deal. But if you look at my fleet at the moment, everything is leased. Everything has to go back in 6 years. So in 6 years' time, we won't have any of the aircraft we have currently. So there's 26 straight off out of your 60. And if we want to grow at what we consider a reasonable rate of 4 aircraft net per year, you've almost got 50 there, and we've only gone 5 years.
Yes.
So there's some huge work going on in places like Mecca, down in Jeddah, to expand both the airports and the religious infrastructure. And that in itself then will free up more visas, that will give better access to people doing Umrah and people coming in for the Hajj. So, that'll only benefit us, and we need to be geared up for that.
And in terms of our fleet, you mentioned Airbus and Boeing. I think that's also Bombardier mentioned. Have they really got a look in? I mean, they've been sweating for several years with this C series, which they're finally going to see in the service this year. I think even this week they might get a bit of luck and they get the big order from Delta. A smaller plane, but would you look at even a mixed fleet if it had good commercial terms?
They were in our thinking originally, but I think we kind of thought it through and thought, do we really want to be a launch customer?
It's always a challenge.
It is, and I think it's a challenge for bigger airlines, to be honest with you. So we unfortunately ruled them out at that stage.
Can't afford to see your punctuality shot to pieces or
no. We've had experience of different aircraft types that don't suit the region, and it wasn't pretty.
So it really is a two-horse race.
Pretty much.
I have both these guys on a panel this afternoon, so I can
good luck.
pass on your thinking to
well, just keep telling them that zero is a good number.
Okay, so you've got the fleet growth plan, infrastructure is changing. I mean, as I mentioned, we've heard a lot in the last few days about Saudi looking at this, I think is it called the National Transformation Plan, wanting to change. And they say part of that is the liberalisation we've been waiting for other airlines to come in. And then perhaps for me at a distance, a surprise in the last 2 weeks to see Saudi itself is going to establish a Cost Airline for next year, fly a deal. Did that come out of the blue for you, or was it something you knew was in the offing?
Well, the rumours of a Saudi low cost have been bouncing around for a little while, so it didn't really come as a shock, no. Since I arrived in the kingdom, I've been hearing about these 2 new airlines that are going to start, and now there's 3.
Yeah.
Bring it on. We know what we are, and we know what we do well, and we know what people like with us. And so long as those things stay constant, then we're happy to stay in business, and we're happy to take on all comers. We've survived very well in the last 12, 13 months. In fact, we've done better than that. We've been thriving, so I don't see any reason why that should be damaged just by a new entrant. We've consistently said that we wanted to see more competition in the kingdom, because more competition will bring more people flying. It'll broaden people's thinking in terms of getting on a plane rather than getting into their car. And a rising tide will lift all boats. So we want to be out ahead of all of that. We'll still be FlyNas by the time everyone else shows up.
So you've really got first mover advantage, you are.
Well, it's first mover, but I think we've got a confidence now in the company that we know what we are. We finally figured it out.
Consistency, as you say.
Well, and we're delivering consistent product. We're delivering good value and on time. So you know, if we continue to do that and not get airs and graces about ourselves, then I think we'd be quite happy to see anyone else flying in the market. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out. Like, will they be subsidised while they?
Will the fare cap disappear?
The fare cap won't disappear, but like there is a plan to reduce it consistently over 5 years down to zero. But 5 years is a long time in Saudi Arabia.
Paul, we've got a few minutes left. I just want to see, would anybody like to ask Paul a question while we have the time? If you would, just stick your hand up and we'll get the mic to you. 5 minutes in case you do decide to.
That's very nice, but everyone asleep. Excellent.
Attentive audience. Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot going on basically.
Sorry, I think we got one
There's
there.
a question here, this lady, so we'll just get a microphone, we'll get a mic to a lady just over here to the left. If you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and ask questions.
Hi, good morning. Dina Cannon from Bloomberg News in Dubai. Hi, Paul. Just a quick question about your thinking on why the C series is no longer in the race. We know that that was one of your considerations, so if you can elaborate a little bit more on your thinking for that.
Well, I suppose the first thing I could say is nothing personal. Bombardier are an excellent company, but we just didn't want to be the test or the launch customer for anything. It's as simple as that.
Any other questions for Paul? Well, one that I didn't ask you, Paul, very obvious question, both for you as an airline and the country. This massive plunge in oil prices, is that a good thing or a bad thing? You benefit in your fuel pricing, but you're in one of the core production centres of the world, and it has an effect on travel.
I think it's proverbial two-edged sword. My CFO is delighted in terms of his costs
reduction.
have gone through the floor, which is great. It's fantastic in terms of, as most airlines are probably enjoying it, having suffered high prices for a number of years. But the other side of it is there's less money in the pocket of my customer. And as I said, 70% of my business is domestic. So people are putting a little more thought into whether they will fly as opposed to how many times they'll fly. And so there is that element of a little bit of putting the brakes on. You can see it around the kingdom in terms of the commerce. Interestingly, like the big companies are starting to think about cost now. And typically what happens is, corporate entertainment and travel are the first two to get hit, and then training usually that's the next one. So it's great to have it off the books, but it won't last forever. You still have to get your fundamentals right.
Yes.
And for the kingdom, I suppose it's a bit of a shock. They've never had to really deal with that level before. But it has, as you said, you mentioned that the royal family are now thinking about how do we change our economy, how do we keep it going. So they're not, they're coming out fighting, which is fantastic. And we're fully supportive of that, and we see ourselves being a Saudi national carrier as getting in behind that and moving commerce around the kingdom and in and out of the kingdom. So it's always nice to take cost out of the structure. It's not something that we could be sitting here in 4 or 5 years' time talking about $150 a barrel. So it's just one of those things.
I mean, maybe arguably for Saudi Arabia, with that thinking by the royal family, parallels could be drawn with Dubai. You had the same reflections years ago with Dubai having such a small amount of its income from oil, and we look at Dubai today.
Well, it adapted really well. It's one of the great tourist destinations now at this stage, like for people in the world, and we benefit greatly from that as well.
Yes.
So there's always, I suppose, the initial shock. what are we going to do now that this has happened? But then, you know, clear thinking comes in, and thankfully we've got people like that in the royal family in Saudi Arabia, and like they're not panicking, they're sensible, and they're going and they're looking after their citizens, and we're quite happy to be part of that.
Excellent. Any more for any more? Yeah, there's a question over on the side. We just get the mic over on this corner, please. Can we have a mic?
Imtiaz Mukul from Travel Impact Newswire in Bangkok. You mentioned Egypt and Turkey and the GCC area as your current catchment area. What about India and others like Iran and Pakistan and others also within the 3-4 hour flying radius?
Yeah. Okay. Well, Iran at the moment is not something that we can politically deal with. We've been told that it's not going to happen for us. That's fine, unfortunately, but it's fine. We had got some plans to go there. We had permissions, especially on the Umrah side, but you know, things move on. We did fly to Pakistan quite substantially when we had A330s. It didn't work for us. We found it very difficult to make money there, so I suppose once bitten, or maybe even twice bitten. It's difficult on a 320 to get to many places in India, and there's also quite a restrictive bilateral agreement between the two countries. So we don't have any access to the Indian market as such outside of the Hajj. Having said that, it's probably not something in our short-term plans. There's a lot of routes that we could do here in the Arabian Peninsula, for example, that we don't fly to at the moment. So maybe once we start flying, you know, whether it's 320 Neos or 737 Maxes, we can get that 5-hour range. But at the moment, it would be a struggle, and we're not a brand that's in the Indian market at the moment, so that would be quite a struggle for us. So we prefer to approach that through our partnership rather than a direct access.
Paul, I think we have one more question, and then we're going to be out of time.
Hi, Murad Mirza, Global Diversity and Inclusion Foundation. Hi, Paul.
Hey, man.
Just wanted to gain your perspective on diversity and inclusion perspective within your organization, and whether Saudization is a challenge for you as far as putting some quotas in the workforce.
Okay, that's it's an interesting one for us. Saudization is something that myself and the other guys that are brought in, I've set every one of them a KPI this year at 50% minimum. It's a challenge because there's no low-cost experience in the country. So it's not like I have a bunch of executives sitting around waiting to be hired who have aviation knowledge. What we do have, though, is a lot of, as I mentioned earlier in the interview, we've got maybe 50% of the country is under 25. So we've got a lot of guys who could learn the business. And we've proposed to the government that we would set up a graduate program where we would bring people in and move them around the business for 2 or 3 years, and depending on their progress, then fit them into the management team. We're always looking for Saudi talent, and you know, it can be a challenge. It's sometimes quite comfortable to work for a company like Saudia, not so much with us, because we actually ask you to do a full day's work. So you know, and it's something we're focused on. Something we believe is the right thing to do. I don't see myself as being in Saudi Arabia, you know, as a long-term thing, and I think it's my duty as in the current job to try and line up a good Saudi replacement who knows how to take FlyNas to the next level after I leave.
Paul, we're out of time. Very, very interesting to hear the number of things that you've personally experienced, what you've brought to your role in FlyNas, the positive progress, and the challenges and opportunities that are coming your way. So if you are still in the helm over the next couple of years, and I'm still doing these sessions, let's have another talk and see how the market's changed. So Paul, the Chief Executive of FlyNas, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the next session is scheduled at 12:10 in here, when we will be speaking with His Excellency Akbar Bakr, Group CEO of Qatar Airways. We are expecting to run that session, the start time for his arrival, a little bit later, possibly about 12:30, but I will be here at 12:10, and I think I'm going to start off with some brief slides about what is happening in Gulf aviation right now. So if you want to come and hear those, have a bit of a discussion prior to Akbar al-Bakar's arrival, please do. But it's 12:10 to 1 o'clock in here, so see you later. Thanks a lot.